the Create AI Act, again in this Congress, which establishes the National Artificial Intelligence Research Resource. This will provide researchers and developers across the computational and data resources they need to create competitive American AI systems that embody our values rather than those of the CCP. I'd like to thank our witnesses for being here today. I look forward to your testimony and to having a productive discussion on this critically important topic. So I'll yield back the balance of my time. I now recognize the ranking member, the representative from Michigan, for her opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Obernolte, someone I like to recognize as a friend, actually, and someone who I've gotten to know over my years in Congress, over his years in Congress, and particularly in his leadership role last term in the Congress, running the Artificial Intelligence Task Force. And now here he sits in a chair that I was once privileged to sit in as the chairman of the Research and Technology Subcommittee, hosting and bringing together our first subcommittee hearing of the 119th session of Congress, a deep dive into what we call DeepSeek, which is a brand of artificial intelligence that has been developed by the Chinese Communist Party, CCP. And I'm explaining that because we have an incredible group of teenagers in the audience here who hail from the great state, arguably the best state in the Union, Michigan. We have reverends from Detroit, rabbi from West Bloomfield, and students who represent the incredible Black Jewish Student Alliance that the Anti-Defamation League of America has brought together. So it is certainly very significant to have them in this hearing and paying witness during this important moment in time as we seek to answer the questions of what is our vision for this nation. Where there is no vision, the people perish. And I'll give you this, that we are certainly seeing a vision right now from the current administration. And it doesn't appear to me as though it is the most successful approach to winning the future as it pertains to the China competition. And I say that with respect, but it is very clear now that the United States has a real competitor in artificial intelligence. And so the fact that we're having this hearing to deep dive into what the Chinese Communist Party is doing with artificial intelligence is very important. I sit on the China Competition Committee. That's another committee that I sit on, and we are grappling with this. And my friends, we recognize that here we are in the year 2025, the quarter century mark that we have now hit as a civilization, as a society, and we are looking to the year 2050 very squarely. And to say that to the teenagers very squarely, to say that to the teenagers in the room, you know, you will be well into your career when we are at the mid-century mark. And our goal must be that the rules-based order of the world needs to continue to be led by open, free market, capitalist democracies. And so as we look to strengthen the breadth of the democracy, this beautiful country that Mr. Obernolte and I both love, we must do so through the pursuit of science, technology, research, and development. And it is not to make anyone who I respect in this room and on this committee and the leadership that is brought by the chairman. We have a problem on our hands when we are firing scientists. We have a problem on our hands when we are squeezing out our scientific research agencies that pay for themselves over and over and over again. What do I mean by that? Yes, we take what we call taxpayer money, the money that our hardworking parents give to the Treasury of the United States, and we as members of Congress allocate to go into something like the National Science Foundation, something like the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, that has a sub-agency focused on artificial intelligence and how we, as the United States of America, can set the rules for the road. So as the chairman just articulated, as we are looking at artificial intelligence to potentially start dictating more of our life, and that might be helpful because there are a lot of things that we have to deal with. Booking tickets, you were saying, sir, making appointments, managing, I don't know, all the likes that you get or groceries you need to buy. There's a lot of, we're producing more data by the second than at any point in civilization. And Mr. Fist is nodding because he knows what I'm talking about. I was working in an IoT research lab before I got to Congress, my friends. You know, the industrial Internet of Things, and that was a decade ago. So our teenagers weren't even teenagers then. And the point is that this AI could really help us. It could help advance society. It could help us advance healthcare outcomes. To students in the room, it can make you better and bolder and more productive and more successful in the future. We've spent a lot of time in this 21st century ushering in fantastic technologies, smartphones and cars that you can call from a device on your hand and all of that. We don't want to be afraid of technology, but we want to be careful that it is our rules, our development of innovation as the United States of America that is pushing forward how we embrace this technology. And I say that with respect to anyone in the world working on this. But one thing we know with the Chinese Communist Party is they're oppressive. Not the people are great, the people are fine, but the party is squishing their own people, and that's a challenge. So I think we'll hear a little bit about this today. Chairman's got his gavel because I'm over my 5 minutes, and with that, I'll yield back. Thank you, good sir.
I thank our ranking member. I'll now recognize the chairman of the full committee, the representative from Texas, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Obernolte, for convening today's hearing. I also want to thank our expert panel of witnesses. Thank you all for being here. Looking forward to your testimony and your participation. Today's discussion presents us with a critical opportunity to examine the impact of DeepSeek's artificial intelligence models on America's technological leadership, innovation ecosystem, and our national security. DeepSeek serves as a significant wake-up call. And on the day of President Trump's second inauguration, this Chinese-owned company released its R1 model, which quickly surpassed ChatGPT to become the top-rated free application in U.S. app stores. The Chinese Communist Party presents a formidable and growing strategic challenge to our technological leadership. We know the CCP is aggressively pursuing plans to dominate next-generation technology, including through the theft of our research, innovations, and our sensitive data. Supporting DeepSeek is part of this plan. In fact, several U.S. government agencies, such as NASA, the U.S. Navy, have banned DeepSeek on federal devices because of its serious data privacy concerns. The emergence of DeepSeek is particularly troubling given reports that it developed these models using American advanced semiconductor chips, including ones that the Department of Commerce had banned from being sold to Chinese entities. However, what's more alarming is that without U.S. leadership and open weight models, DeepSeek could become the foundation for global AI applications that promote CCP values and potentially contain hidden vulnerabilities. And if the United States cedes leadership in AI to the CCP, we risk not only our economic future, but also our national security. The development and deployment of critical technologies such as AI, quantum, and advanced semiconductors could be compromised by the values of the CCP, resulting in a failure to uphold American ideals of fairness and transparency. But let's be clear. We cannot surpass China by imitating its approach. We must build systems that promote coordination and cooperation across the entire U.S. science and technology enterprise, both public and private, while leveraging the benefits of the free market. We should continue to follow the recipe for success that has led to American leadership in other emerging technologies, such as information technology, quantum, biotech, space, and energy. This includes tearing down government barriers to private sector innovation, lowering taxes, protecting private property, reducing energy costs, and leveraging standards and best practices rather than aggressive regulations and market corrupting subsidies. America's strength has always been our innovative spirit, our entrepreneurial drive, and our commitment to individual liberty. The Trump administration acknowledged this fundamental truth in a January executive order, which stated that the policy of the United States is to sustain and enhance America's global AI dominance in order to promote human flourishing, economic competitiveness, and our national security. This approach underscores the significance of American leadership without unnecessary government intervention. We've already seen progress in this direction with the announcement of the Stargate project and the proliferation of little tech investments by the private sector. These trends build upon the substantial advantage we have as a nation. We have robust capital markets, innovative companies, cutting-edge research institutions, and bountiful natural resources that fuel our emerging technology enterprise. But DeepSeek is a reminder that we must be vigilant and never take our leadership for granted. Evaluating the capabilities of Chinese models is critical to understanding the competitive landscape, maintaining our technological advantage, and assessing the risks they pose to national security. And how we respond to challenges like DeepSeek will determine whether the United States continues to lead in the world in AI or whether we allow the CCP to overtake us. I look forward to hearing from you witnesses today about DeepSeek's models and how the U.S. public and private sectors can accelerate American AI leadership into the future. And with that, I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chairman Babin. I now recognize the ranking member of the full committee, my colleague from California, for her opening statement.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, for this hearing. I look forward to a productive discussion about our country's progress in artificial intelligence. In the last Congress, the Science Committee developed several good bipartisan bills seeking to advance the nation in AI. We understood bills seeking to advance the nation in AI. We understood that our leadership was threatened even then, and today the threat is plain as day for all to see. 2 months ago, the release of the V3 and R1 AI models by the Chinese firm DeepSeek caused many Americans to awaken to the realization that we can't take our leadership in emerging technologies for granted. Securing our research and applying targeted export controls are necessary, but they're insufficient steps to ensuring American leadership in AI. To win the AI race, we have to realize our potential by enabling and supporting scientific advancement through the infrastructure, institutions, and most importantly, the people who truly drive American innovation. Put another way, we need both a defensive strategy and an offensive strategy. Now, the Science Committee is responsible for supporting and overseeing non-defense federal AI R&D. One key agency under our purview is the National Science Foundation, which focuses on advancing the fundamental science of AI. As of last year, NSF was on track to spend about $750 million on AI-related research. To understand how this funding contributes to AI advancements, consider the funding of PhD student Andrew Barto, whose work in computational reinforcement learning laid the foundations for modern AI. Earlier this year, Dr. Barto received the prestigious Turing Award for his contributions. His early work was NSF funded, as has been so much of the early research enabling today's AI breakthroughs. The NSF AI Institutes program, a $500 million investment, connects over 500 funded and collaborative institutions across the United States to form the nation's largest AI research ecosystem. I'm very excited by the work of the AI Institute for Next Generation Food Systems at UC Davis. The people, institutions, and infrastructure supported by NSF, the Department of Energy, NIST, and so many more federal science agencies form the backbone of American scientific leadership. Now, I have to say, it's unfortunate that our nation's great scientific minds are now facing an environment of uncertainty, distrust, and reduced funding. President Trump, with his Musk Doge hackers, are wreaking havoc on our scientific enterprise, not just endangering our ability to lead in AI in so many critical fields, but I think actively sabotaging our leadership. I'll name just a few of these setbacks. The Trump administration has fired thousands of government professionals in critical technology roles. These talented individuals are now being recruited by other countries, including China. They've terminated countless active research and education training camps, and we anticipate further substantial cuts in the FY 2026 budget request. They've deported graduate students for exercising First Amendment rights, effectively broadcasting to foreign students and scientists to stay away. In the weeks leading up to this hearing, universities across the country have significantly reduced incoming PhD student admissions because of funding uncertainty. Who among the next aspiring students turned away might have been our next Andrew Barton? We'll never know. Just 2 weeks ago, I think this is quite chilling, a scientific journal found that 75% of PhD students polled were considering leaving the United States. When asked where they'd go, one response captures the grave concern that we should consider today: anywhere that supports science. If we seek to be global leaders in AI, we have to collectively wake up to the reality of the harm that is being done under our watch, the harm being done to the science enterprise in the United States. I hope that the U.S. still has time to reverse course on our worst impulses and win the AI race. I look forward to having this discussion today about paths forward. And I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Lofgren. We'll now go to witness testimony. Our first witness today is Mr. Adam Thier. Mr. Thier is Senior Fellow for the Technology Innovation Team at the R Street Institute. He previously spent 12 years as a Senior Fellow at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University. He also previously served as the President of the Progress and Freedom Foundation. Mr. Thier, you're recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Thank you. Chairman Obernolte, Ranking Member Stevens, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the invitation to participate in this important hearing. My name is Adam Thier, and I'm a Senior Fellow at the R Street Institute, where I focus on emerging technology issues. Related to this hearing, I recently released a 3-part R Street series entitled Ramifications of China's DeepSeek Moment, and I have appended those essays to my written testimony. I'll begin with an admission. I am as stunned as just as all as you are about how fast China has caught up with America in artificial intelligence. In fact, in testimony just 10 months ago before the Joint Economic Committee, I noted how lucky America was that our AI innovators were firmly in the driver's seat and not yet having to worry about China surprising us with a powerful new AI system that might represent a modern Sputnik moment. And then in late January of this year, my worst fears came true when that AI Sputnik moment happened with DeepSeek's January 20th launch of its open source R1 model. It sent shockwaves for tech markets and policy circles alike, and rightly so. DeepSeek's model competes favorably with leading American models and at a lower cost. President Trump and many other policymakers have referred to it as a, quote, wake-up call for our nation. But what happened next was equally stunning. Just days after DeepSeek's R1 launch, Alibaba, another Chinese tech giant, announced the most powerful version yet of its Qwen model, which outperformed R1. DeepSeek responded by announcing it would release an even more capable version of its model. Chinese tech giant Tencent Holdings then launched its T1 model that outperformed both of those models and some American models. Finally, Manus AI, a Chinese startup, launched a powerful new general AI agent. All of this happened in less than 2 months. Perhaps these developments should not have surprised us. After all, the Chinese Communist Party has made its imperial ambitions clear with its stated goal to become, quote, the world's primary AI innovation center by 2030, and the CCP uses aggressive forms of innovation mercantilism in pursuit of that goal. The House Select Committee on Strategic Competition between the U.S. and the Chinese Communist Party has highlighted how, quote, the CCP has pursued a multi-decade campaign of economic aggression against the United States and its allies, quote. More problematically, the CCP is engaged in a concerted effort to export digital authoritarianism through its Digital Silk Road effort meant to spread influence through global investment. Experts now speak of a China-led, quote, authoritarian tech offensive and the rise of, quote, an AI axis of autocratic states looking to advance their control agendas through technology. I believe there are three lessons from the DeepSeek moment. First, China clearly understands that AI is the most important general purpose and dual-use technology of our era. AI is essential to both widespread economic development and national security goals. Second, China understands that AI is also the most important information technology of modern times, and that it has profound potential to influence cultural values and speech policies globally. Third, China understands that rapid diffusion of AI both drives these objectives in many ways. China is flooding the market with nimble but very effective AI systems, just as they have previously used low-cost, rapid response strategies to gain greater market share globally in other sectors. These are the reasons why House Energy and Commerce Committee Chairman Brett Guthrie recently argued that China's rapid ascendancy in advanced computation, quote, really is an existential threat to our country and the world. If America is going to win the so-called AI Cold War, we need to understand that traditional containment strategies won't work. We're not going to bottle up all Chinese AI advances with analog era controls, and costly and poorly targeted industrial policy gimmicks won't help much either. We won't beat China by copying China. Instead, America must race ahead and stay in the cutting edge of the technological frontier to win. We must re-embrace the core advantages in this fight with China that we've always had: freedom, the freedom to innovate, invest, speak, learn, and grow using advanced technological systems. In the 1990s, we did this with a flexible governance approach that helped America dominate the digital revolution, and we can do it again in a bipartisan fashion. Here's a very quick checklist of the pro-freedom technology agenda that we need to advance AI opportunity in America. We must embrace open source AI innovation and let it blossom. Ensure diverse energy markets for AI. Win the talent war by attracting the world's best and brightest scientists and engineers. Ensure balanced copyright and data privacy policies. Craft a national framework that preempts and puts a moratorium on the confusing patchwork of now almost 1,000 state and local AI proposals pending today. Require federal agencies to review their existing policies to determine how they might hamper AI. Ensure agencies have the resources and training needed to address novel AI issues. And of course, defend the importance of free speech in the algorithmic age. This opportunity-oriented AI agenda is the way to beat China. We must not allow fear-based policies to impede American AI development and diffusion, or else China wins. Thank you for holding this hearing, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Thier. Our next witness is Mr. Gregory Allen. Mr. Allen is the director of the Wadhwani AI Center at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. He previously served as the director of strategy and policy at the Department of Defense Joint Artificial Intelligence Center. He also previously served as the head of the market analysis and competitive strategy at Blue Origin. Mr. Allen, you are recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Mr. Chair, Ranking Member, distinguished members of the committee, thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you here today. DeepSeek is an important milestone in China's progress in artificial intelligence, but this progress did not come out of nowhere. For one thing, if you were to go to the leading AI conferences around the world where top researchers meet, it was utterly routine, even 5 years ago, for Chinese researchers to win the top paper awards, to present research results that are impressive to all of their peers in their field. China's progress in AI has been incredibly impressive and incredibly steady for the better part of a decade at this point. And they really do recognize it as the most transformative technology of our age for both economic and military power. In DeepSeek's case specifically, this is a firm that is descended from a high-frequency trading firm. It actually comes out of the finance industry. And if you've heard about the Michael Lewis book, Flash Boys, you will know that these types of companies are obsessed with their computing infrastructure. They build their own data centers. They come up with every potential advantage they can because they are chasing nanosecond level advantages in beating the market in executing these trades. Well, these computational infrastructure advantages are a critical reason why DeepSeek had the technical talent pool and the technical infrastructure needed to achieve what it did with its V3 and R1 models, which are broadly equivalent to the global state of the art circa mid-2024. So in December of 2024, they are achieving what American companies had achieved in mid-2024. But I think an important question here is, where might they be if U.S. policy had been different? And here I'm speaking specifically about the Biden administration's export controls on advanced computer chips. And it is actually the case that the CEO of DeepSeek in a mid-2024 interview said that the number one challenge facing his company was American export controls. Not getting high quality talent, not getting access to more money. The number one challenge facing his company was American export controls. As a previous Chinese government think tank paper put it over a year or several years ago, without AI chips, there's no AI. And this is the situation that we've tried to face the Chinese government by restricting their access to chips. Now, right now, NVIDIA, which is the leading global provider of advanced AI chips, their growth as a company is supply constrained, not demand constrained. If TSMC, their preferred manufacturer for chips, could make more chips, they would be selling more chips. For every chip that comes off that assembly line, there are 5 people who would love to buy that chip. And what we said with those export controls is that we're not going to allow those advanced chips to go to China, where we know they will directly advance the party's agenda for economic and military power. Right now, the most advanced computing cluster in the world is the Colossus supercomputing cluster run by xAI in Memphis. It has 200,000 H100 chips. This is an incredibly beefy supercomputer. If we did not have these export controls over the past few years, I think it is entirely plausible that the largest supercomputing cluster for AI in the world would be in China right now. But what are we going to do in the future? I would say export controls depend upon 3 critical factors: authority, capacity, and will. What we have right now are really good authorities. Between the IEPA law that's very, very old and the more recent law that's passed, the US federal government, and specifically the executive branch, if they want to put in place export controls, they generally have legal means to do it. In terms of will, I think here is where the Biden administration fell short. To give you just one example, in December 2024, the Biden administration implemented export controls on high bandwidth memory chips. These are critical input goods to NVIDIA AI chips and everybody else's AI chips. In fact, about half of the dollar value of an NVIDIA chip is these HBM input chips. Well, that export control was telegraphed in July and then implemented in December. So what do you think Huawei did in those interceding 6 months? They amassed a multi-year stockpile of those chips. And this is why I say the administration fell short in terms of will. And the final issue is about capacity. Are we actually giving the government agencies that are responsible for administering these export controls the staff, the money, and the enabling technology that they need to successfully implement these controls? And I would say no. This agency's budget has gone down in inflation-adjusted terms since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, since these Chinese export controls. Their job has gotten massively harder, and the resources to support them have dwindled. I believe there's no more powerful return on investment opportunity available anywhere in U.S. national security than strengthening our export controls enforcement and administration capacity. And with that, I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Our next witness is Dr. Julia Stoyanovich. Dr. Stoyanovich is the Institute Associate Professor of Computer Science and Engineering, Associate Professor of Data Science, and Director of the Center for Responsible AI at New York University. She is a recipient of the Presidential Early Career Award for Scientists and Engineers, awarded by nomination from the National Science Foundation, and a senior member of the Association for Computing Machinery. Dr. Stoyanovich, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Babin, Ranking Member Lofgren, Subcommittee Chairman Obernolte, Subcommittee Ranking Member Stevens, and other members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on the national security and technological implications of DeepSeek. In a few short months, what was once unthinkable has become a cliche, and we have already heard this cliche today, but I'll repeat it once again, but with correct pronunciation. We are in a Sputnik moment. Okay? The rapid rise, technical openness, and competitive performance of DeepSeek have challenged the long-standing assumption that the US would retain its global leadership in AI by default. DeepSeek's latest models rival top US systems while requiring fewer resources to build, reshaping global expectations around efficiency and access, and signaling a risk of falling behind for the United States in this strategically vital domain. This demands bold federal action, sustained investment, coherent policy direction, and a commitment to open, high-impact research that serves the public interest. US leadership in AI is not just about innovation. It's about protecting our economic resilience, national security, and global influence. Let me turn to how DeepSeek compares to American models in terms of accessibility, transparency, and security. Technically, DeepSeek and US-based models share the same developmental structure: pre-training, fine-tuning, and alignment. However, DeepSeek emphasizes efficiency, openness in technical reporting, and specialization in domains like code and math. Its transparency, particularly in publishing the model architecture, training methodology, as well as evaluation benchmarks, meets or exceeds that of any US-based vendor. That level of transparency matters. It allows researchers to understand how models are built, assess safety claims, and replicate results. It lowers barriers to entry and fosters inclusive innovation across academia, startups, and public institutions. But transparency is often misunderstood. Releasing model weights alone is not enough. While weights tell us how a model processes its input, they do not reveal why it behaves the way it does, what it has learned, or what knowledge it's missing. That insight comes from data transparency, knowledge of the datasets used in training, which can reveal risks related to accuracy, bias, privacy, and security. Today, neither DeepSeek nor leading US vendors provide adequate data transparency, and this limits meaningful evaluation and raises concerns about accountability and misuse. And this brings me to the core issue, and that is data governance and national security. DeepSeek's privacy policy indicates that user data, including prompts, device information, and IP addresses, is stored on servers in China. There is no public documentation about whether user inputs are retained, reused, or subject to opt-out. And this creates a serious vulnerability. US citizen and enterprise data could be repurposed under the jurisdiction of a strategic competitor. And this is not just a matter of consumer privacy. As LLMs become embedded in productivity tools, enterprise systems, and education platforms, how user data is collected and managed becomes strategically vital. If widely used models capture data from US engineers or regulators, they could expose sensitive coding practices, priorities, or strategies. Stored abroad, such data presents not only a privacy risk, but a loss of data sovereignty. Unlike accidental leaks, this surveillance could be deliberate, engineered with no visible trace to the user, and without enforceable protections or transparency, we can't reliably detect or prevent it. To be clear, DeepSeek's opacity is not unique. US companies also vary in their practices, with limited transparency on how data is stored or reused. In short, no major provider offers appropriate transparency today, but none operate under the same legal obligations or pose the same jurisdictional risks as DeepSeek. It's important to emphasize that data governance and transparency are not in conflict. They are mutually reinforcing. Strong data governance establishes the policies and safeguards that protect sensitive information, while transparency ensures that those protections can be evaluated, verified, and improved. Without transparency, we can't check whether data is being handled in accordance with legal and ethical standards. Conversely, transparency without governance can expose data to misuse. Together, they form the foundation for responsible AI. Transparency enables oversight, and governance ensures accountability. So what should the US do? I have 3 recommendations. The first is to foster an open research environment to close the strategic gap. And this includes robust funding for fundamental AI science, public datasets, model development, and compute access. The National AI Research Resource is essential here, providing academic institutions with data, compute, and training that is necessary for us to compete. Federal support for the National Science Foundation and other agencies is vital for sustaining and advancing our research and skilled AI workforce. My second recommendation is to incentivize transparency across the AI lifecycle. And I can elaborate on this during questions. And my third is to establish a strong data protection regime. The US must lead not only in AI performance, but in responsible, privacy-preserving AI infrastructure. And there are many examples that we can learn from, but we have to develop our own models here. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Stoyanovich. Our final witness is Mr. Tim Fist. Mr. Fist is the Director of Emerging Technology at the Institute for Progress. He is also a Senior Adjunct Fellow at the Center for New American Security. Mr. Fist, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairman Obernolte, Ranking Member Stevens, and other members of the subcommittee, thank you and good morning. And today I'm going to be talking about responding to the DeepSeek moment through the lens of both state capacity and R&D. My organization, IFP, focuses on accelerating scientific progress and innovation, so I see this as a suitable lens. And I'll start by noting that many of my fellow witnesses have described the DeepSeek moment as both a Sputnik and a Sputnik moment. And while I think this comparison is powerful, I also think that it is somewhat incomplete. And I think the particular ways that it is incomplete can help inform us about what lessons to take away. So I'm going to cover the 3 lessons that I see as most important. Lesson number 1, to win against China in open source AI, we need to secure every layer of the tech stack. So if we look at the rocket technologies behind Sputnik, they were closed. We couldn't use them. In contrast, DeepSeek's AI models and applications are freely available to the whole world. So not only can they use them against us, we can use them against us. So what are the actual risks here? Well, you know, the DeepSeek app has already shown a tendency to spread CCP propaganda. But if we were only worried about communist chatbots, we probably wouldn't be here today. The bigger risks that are on the horizon come from this new paradigm in AI known as agents. You can think of agents as AI models designed to operate autonomously, completing tasks by themselves. Research shows that these models can have backdoors. So you could have your software engineer agent happily programming away, and then suddenly when a trigger condition is met, like if it is deployed in the networks of an American organization, suddenly it can start outputting insecure code. And crucially, these kinds of backdoors are currently impossible to detect. And this may not seem like a big deal now, but it will be a big deal when we want to use AI not just to give us cooking recipes, but also to write all our code, manage our health and energy systems, conduct scientific research, and make military decisions. This world is fast approaching, and in some fields like software, it's actually already here. And the way that we outcompete China in this world, where everyone wants to deploy AI agents, but everyone is worried about the vulnerabilities they create, is not just to have the best AI, but also the most secure AI and the most reliable AI. For example, investing in AI interpretability research could help us detect backdoors, but also understand the capabilities of Chinese models and make our own models more reliable. And we need security not just at the software layer, but also at the hardware layer. If the foundation of American science and industry is going to be built on AI, we also need to ensure that the computer chips and the data centers that our models are running on can't easily be sabotaged. Federal R&D can and should be used to accelerate the build out of this secure and reliable AI technology stack. This work could be supported through NIST and the national labs. In my written testimony, I provide specific examples of projects and funding mechanisms. Lesson 2, we need a better alarm system. In the Sputnik case, the Soviets blew right past us. Their rockets had 50 times the payload capacity of our own. In AI, DeepSeek's models still lag behind American models. This means that we actually still have time to prepare for more significant breakthroughs from China. But AI is moving fast, and actually our initial reaction to DeepSeek was based on their analysis of their own capabilities rather than our own. Next time it needs to be different. We need a team of technical experts within the federal government to help the government see what's coming and respond proactively with things like export controls. This team should be collecting data from industry as well as the intelligence community and analyzing the capabilities of Chinese models and chips before they come out. NIST could be a great home for this team, and it's good at hiring technical talent, and it already has the trust of industry. But NIST normally works on things like standards and guidelines rather than rapid analysis. This could be solved by giving NIST, ideally the AI Safety Institute at NIST, a clear tasking. Final lesson 3, we need a faster engine. Unlike Sputnik, DeepSeek was built using American technologies. As my colleague Greg has mentioned, this gives us leverage in the form of export controls. And indeed, DeepSeek's founder said it best. The only thing holding them back is access to American chips. But it's not just enough to slow down their R&D engine. We also need to speed up our engine. We need to ensure that American developers are building the world's best open source models, not just for chatbots, but also for AI used in science, robotics, and manufacturing. In my written testimony, I talk about cost-efficient ways we could support open source using prize competitions at NIST, combined with model and dataset hosting on the National AI Research Resource. A faster engine also means making sure that we have enough electricity to support the next generation of cutting-edge models. The demands of AI development are already straining America's electricity infrastructure. First, we need to reduce timelines for environmental permitting. Then we need to help developers take on the technical risks that are involved in rapidly building new power plants, which should include natural gas, geothermal, and small modular reactors. One idea currently being pursued by the Department of Energy is making federal lands available for building power plants and data centers. The Department of Energy should complement this with research into technologies like rapid construction of modular data centers, carbon capture for natural gas, and mechanisms for quickly scaling up nuclear supply chains. I'll conclude my remarks there, and I look forward to the discussion.
Well, thank you, Mr. Fist, and thank you to all of our witnesses. We'll move now to questions and answers from members of our committee, and I'll lead off by recognizing myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Thier, thank you very much for your testimony. You had mentioned, you gave a pretty comprehensive list of the ways that we need to act to ensure continued American leadership in AI development. And one of the things that you mentioned that caught my attention was the nearly 1,000 pending bills in state legislatures across the country on the topic of AI regulation. Could you talk a little bit more about why you think that that's a threat and what you think that we in Congress need to do about that?
Absolutely. So, Mr. Chairman, I know this has been a priority of yours, and in the House AI Task Force report, this was something that was highlighted specifically both in the section on federal-state relations, but also in the section on small business, where the House AI Task Force bipartisan report basically made clear that the growing complexity of all of the differing definitions and regimes for AI regulation could eventually become a formidable barrier to new types of entry and the so-called rise of little tech or open source AI systems. I think that's a chronic problem when you have nearly 1,000, as of this morning, 958 state bills, or total AI bills, most of them being state, are pending. They haven't all passed yet, but a lot of activity, and again, a lot of different definitions of even how to define AI. If you're a small business person in this country and you are making an attempt to break into a marketplace, but you're confronted with that many different regulatory regimes and all that red tape, that is going to really set back your ability to become a leading edge competitor on the fly to compete with the things like DeepSeek and others that we see coming out of China. You know, for all of the restrictions that Chinese AI operators face, a lot of the smaller entrepreneurs have a lot of leeway to go out there and do things in a really flexible, nimble, low-cost fashion.
So how should we in Congress respond to that?
I think you've teed up the idea, Mr. Chairman, in the past of some sort of preemption. This is squarely interstate algorithmic commerce and speech we're talking about with a lot of this stuff. And we in the 1990s had a bipartisan agreement with this Congress, which was Republican at the time, and the Clinton-Gore administration to have a national framework be part of our Telecommunications Act of 1996, and then our 1997 Framework for Global Electronic Commerce, and then even a moratorium we had a year after that with the Internet Tax Freedom Act of 1998. That was a really wonderful model, established a national framework, said here are some rules that we're going to set for the road about how it works. The whole process has now been inverted. The states are driving and Congress is waiting. Congress needs to step in and either set some clear guidelines for how the states should do these things, or, in my opinion, we should have a moratorium on aggressive forms of new AI regulation to make sure we don't shoot ourselves in the foot as this race with China gets underway.
Sure. Well, I mean, obviously, I very much agree with you. We had a whole chapter on preemption in the AI task force report, but one of the points that we make is we can't preempt something with nothing, which means that we need to get busy in enacting some of the recommendations in that report to create a comprehensive framework for AI governance at the federal level. And then I think we'll have the moral authority to preempt what the states are doing and to set what the guardrails are, because there'll be a role for them as well. I want to thank you very much for that. Dr. Stoyanovich, you mentioned the importance of the National AI Research Resource. And obviously, I'm going to give you the shameless opportunity to plug our bill here. We've been trying to codify NAIR. I was pretty disappointed that we couldn't get that across the finish line, especially with as a legacy to our colleague, Representative Eshoo from California last year. We're trying again this year. Why is getting this done so important?
Thank you for this really important question. I am a big proponent of the NAIR because I see a lot of enthusiasm for the resource in the research community in terms of both our increased access to research compute, to data sets, as well as potentially to some training mechanisms that the NAIR will provide. And I use the NAIR also in my own research, and it has enabled me and my group to do things that we could not have done, specifically on assessing large language models like the ones that we're talking about today. It's absolutely crucial for us to make sure that the NAIR exists and that it's developed at the full scale. The NSF has been running it in pilot, and they have been doing an amazing job considering the limited resources that they have had. But we need to really have access to the NAIR at full capacity. And I think that it's important for us to think also about how small and medium-sized businesses can benefit from the NAIR, and furthermore, how we can strengthen its role as a resource for training and upskilling and reskilling, in addition to its primary role, which would be to support academic research. In short, we simply cannot compete against China if we don't have a resource like the NAIR. And there's a lot of enthusiasm in the community.
Well, thank you. We'll continue to push on that, and hopefully we could get that across the finish line this year. I have about a dozen other questions, but I'm going to set a good example as the leader and wrap it up because I see my time's expired. I'll now recognize Ranking Member Stevens for 5 minutes for her questions.
Thank you. Another exciting and thrilling hearing. Mr. Allen, can you just talk to me about where you work? What is this Center for Strategic International Studies in this Wadawani Center that you run? Go ahead.
Yes, the Center for Strategic and International Studies is a think tank based in Washington, D.C.
Who funds them?
I believe about 10% of the funding comes from the U.S. government.
Okay.
And then another share comes from philanthropic, and then another share comes from corporate donors.
Okay. Okay. And then what's this Wadawani?
So CSIS includes, more than 35 separate programs that are organized into 4 departments. And the Wadawani AI Center is one of those programs. So at CSIS, there's a missile.
Is that a person? Is Wadawani a person? Or?
Yes, and he is the anchor donor of our center. His name is Ramesh Wadwani, and he is the founder of Symphony AI.
Okay.
He is one of the origins of AI research going back to Carnegie Mellon many decades ago. He's an American citizen, and this is part of him sort of giving back to his country. I should note that one of his many virtues is that he's one of very few Silicon Valley tech billionaires who doesn't make any money in China.
Yeah, well, that's exciting. And, maybe we can talk to him at some point. And I'm sure you talk to him a lot about your research, and you always want to be able to have people doing pure research and coming up with these ideas. Because you were saying that we were lacking the will, and that caught my attention. So how do you think that should have rolled out when we were putting those export controls on? Should we have made it closer to the date, like caught them by surprise? A little bit more?
I would describe the current approach that we have taken as there's an interagency debate. And the debate is, should we have a surprise attack or should we have no attack? And then they compromise on attack without the surprise, which is the worst of all the choices that you could have made. And we make that choice again and again and again.
Yeah.
So what I would say is that at this stage, there are costs to our export control policy. It's not fun to have an aggressive export control policy, but we are incurring all of the costs of a maximalist aggressive export control policy, and we are only incurring a fraction of the possible strategic benefits because of the way that we are going about
Because of the
executing it.
rollout? Is that what you're saying? Because of the rollout?
Only one of the failure modes that I could have talked about.
Yeah.
But yes.
Because we met with ARM over in
Mhm.
overseas. Actually, they got some people with Michigan there, but we were in the China committee, and we were with ARM, and ARM was really pushing on these export controls for some of their products that and some of the Chinese products that were going to go into our manufacturing or our AI, and they're saying they could still be observing if we allow these Chinese, it's not
Sorry,
chips,
just
but
to
it's-
clarify, you're saying ARM was in favor of the export control.
Yeah, they were.
Okay.
They wanted export, and I don't know if we ever did it. And it
Mhm.
caught my attention because they wanted to block CCP technologies from coming here because it was open source per se, and
Mhm.
it wasn't as high quality. And obviously, this stuff is quite complicated. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in the semiconductor space for a long time, and and I'm by no means a PhD expert, but I appreciated your articulation. And Mr. Fist, too, we want to talk to you about this AI Safety Institute. I don't know if you've heard about that with NIST, and what would the impact be on our ability to influence global standards if we were to stop participating in the international network for AI safety institutes?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, so what I will say is I think NIST is critical within the AI space. I think there's two roles that NIST and the AI Safety Institute can fulfill.
And they're low cost, by the way. They're
Yes.
critical, but they're low. We give them, just a little drop, pennies on the dollar.
Indeed, yeah, and AI is only a small fraction of the work that NIST
Yeah.
is currently doing, as you know. But yeah, I see there being two key roles that NIST and the AI Safety Institute can play. One is this standard setting exercise, so sort of creating standards that allow technologies to be from AI to be integrated into the American economy, and influencing those global standards on the world stage is obviously important for creating an export market for those technologies too. So I really see it as a path to speeding up diffusion and adoption of US technologies, sort of built on good standards. The other is this role that I talked about in my testimony, which is we need some sort of capacity to measure and evaluate the capabilities of AI systems so we can do more proactive policy making. I think, DeepSeek unfortunately caught a lot of policymakers by surprise, but it's not like it should have been a surprise, as Greg mentioned earlier. The research was available, we sort of had access to it.
Okay,
So yeah,
thank you.
thank you.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Okay, I'll now recognize the chairman of the full committee, Congressman Babin, for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. One of the challenges in public discussions around emerging AI companies like DeepSeek is separating fact from fiction. Mr. Thier, I wanted to ask you the first question. Did DeepSeek develop its models for just $5.6 million? Is that true?
That's what people believe. We don't know the exact numbers because, of course, they won't share them. But yes, that's the estimate people have put out there, 5 to 6.
But you can't verify that.
There's no way to verify
Yeah,
that.
right.
It's impossible.
And Mr. Allen, did DeepSeek use Chinese chips, or did it use U.S. chips? We're hearing rumors there, either by acquiring them before export controls took effect or through evading those export controls.
Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I'd like to also address the previous question.
Sure.
The cost when you're doing drug discovery as a pharmaceutical company is not just the cost of the clinical trial that worked, it's the cost of all the clinical trials that didn't work, right? You're searching for what is the right drug. And that is the same with DeepSeek. That training run, that was for the training run on that AI model that worked, but you had to do a bunch of experiments that didn't work to find that one that did work. So I actually believe DeepSeek when they claim that the cost of training that AI model was $5.6 million. But was that the cost of their AI training infrastructure? No. Was that the cost of all the experiments that it took to lead to that success? No, I would estimate that was in the hundreds of millions or billions of dollars.
Okay. And then if you'll answer my question about the chips, how do they acquire them?
Yes. So the best reporting on this topic right now is that DeepSeek's AI infrastructure includes 10,000 H100 chips, 10,000 H800 chips, 30,000 H20 chips. And those are all American chips, but only one of them has always been illegal to export to China, and that is the H100. Now, this estimate, which comes from SemiAnalysis, citing sources that they've talked to in China's supply chain, I find it to be a credible projection. However, I also believe it is credible that DeepSeek did train this specific model using the H800 chip, which was a chip that NVIDIA specifically crafted for the Chinese market as a way to evade U.S. export controls by degrading one aspect of technical performance below the export control threshold. And this is another instance in which we took far too long to update our export controls in the face of new developments. So there was a year-long period in which it was legal to sell these very high-performing H800 chips. And DeepSeek bought a lot of those chips during the period in which it was able to do it. And just because you make something illegal to sell doesn't mean everything that you've already sold magically disappears. So when you look at DeepSeek's progress, you are really looking at the lagging impact of the poor design of the first tranche of Biden administration export controls and the year that it took them to update the technical performance specifications between October 2022 and October 2023. But as the CEO of DeepSeek has said, these export controls are still having a significant impact on his company, on the Chinese AI ecosystem. It could just be a much larger one if we were doing a better job.
Thank you. Mr. Fisk, does DeepSeek suppress information on certain topics? Can users trust that their data will be protected from foreign exploitation?
I haven't seen a super systematic analysis of this, but there have now been dozens of reports that it does seem to suppress information on things like Tiananmen Square, the Uyghur population, and other examples of classic CCP propaganda.
Okay, thank you. And then let's see, the Stanford Institute for Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence recently released their 2025 AI Index report, which indicated that private investment in U.S. AI was $109.1 billion in 24, more than 10 times the amount invested in China, $9.3 billion. Earlier this year, the Stargate project announced a $500 billion investment in American AI. Mr. Thureer, what is more important for U.S. leadership in AI, federal funding or a permissive environment that allows for private sector investment and innovation?
Yeah, we obviously need that private sector investment to be high, as you just reported, Congressman. And it basically, the number you cited there, what's even more exciting about that being 10x higher than what China's invested in terms of private AI investment, is that that's over a 10-year period, it was only 4x. We were averaging about 4 times as much as China. That's still great news, but last year it was almost 11 times as much, actually. So we need more of that, and what yields that kind of private sector investment is a more permissive, permissionless innovation type environment where we encourage innovators to go out and do bold things.
Exactly. Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman yields back. Ms. Lofgren, you're recognized.
Thank you very much. This has been a useful hearing, and I appreciate the testimony of all the witnesses. It's interesting, Mr. Thureer, you talked about the role of states, and it reminded me of the issue we had in the last Congress, where Congresswoman Eshoo and I played a very active role in discouraging California from preempting in a way that would have been very adverse. And ultimately, we did succeed in getting California to back off. And it's worth noting that they have now come up with a framework that really matches the objections we made. So the states have a role to play, and we have a role to play to keep them from doing something that is adverse to innovation. I have a concern, I will say, about some of the way we have developed our export controls. I am for strong export controls on hardware and chip manufacturing in China, and I think the rollout has been lagging in some cases, and that is something we should deal with. I'm also concerned, however, that we are not currently engaged as a nation in multilateralism. And if we impose export controls with U.S. only, and international companies have the capacity to sell to China the equivalent, we haven't really achieved what we're trying to do. And so, for example, I've just learned that ASML has just announced they're going to build a chip manufacturing in China for the first time. So, Mr. Allen, what should the U.S. be doing to support multilateral controls on China's access to chips and chip equipment?
Well, thank you so much for that question. And I think it's just worth pointing out the overriding logic is very obvious here. Why would you not sell them chips, but sell them the equipment they can use to make those chips by themselves, right? One without
Correct.
the other is a terrible, terrible strategy. And the challenge that we face is while the US is the overall leader in semiconductor manufacturing equipment by a large margin, we're also not alone up there at the top. And in particular, the Dutch and the Japanese industries are both quite strong, and other subcomponent players are also very strong, like Germany, which makes some critical technologies here. So the Biden administration pursued a multilateral approach very aggressively and at some cost. It takes time to make multilateralism work. There are options for going unilateral, such as the imposition of the foreign direct product rule, which basically takes advantage of the fact that, for example, some key components of ASML technologies are made in the United States. So you apply US export controls to that content of the machine. Or more recently, what the United States did is point out that all semiconductor manufacturing equipment, even Chinese semiconductor manufacturing equipment, includes inside it chips that were made using American semiconductor manufacturing equipment. So there are options.
But we have competitors for that as well.
Well, I think the key point is here is we can go the unilateral option, but that is incredibly imposing upon our allies.
Right.
And they have to be willing to do that because even for the things that only America sells, Japan usually has a company who could get into that business if they wanted to.
Correct.
And so if we impose export controls and our allies do not impose matching export controls, the cost of this strategy, the efficacy of this strategy, the cost goes way up, the efficacy goes way down.
Thank you very much. AI models improve with data, and access to diverse, high quality data sets is a strategic advantage. If DeepSeek's models are collecting data from American users, this could serve as a pipeline for the Chinese to improve its AI capabilities. And I was very interested, Mr. Fisk, in your comments about the agents or backdoors. What technical countermeasures, if any, could be in place to prevent adversarial data access? And by the way, also the backdoor issue that you mentioned.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So a lot of the measures might just look like standard data privacy regulation that you might put in place either at the levels of companies or individual jurisdictions. On the technical side, yeah, I think the key problem here is just actually understanding why these models behave the way that they do. So I mentioned AI interpretability research, which is essentially opening up the black box of an AI model's digital mind and peering inside and trying to develop a mechanistic understanding of why it does the things it does. I think this research is going to be critical, not just for detecting when an AI system developed by an adversary has a backdoor, but also for making our own models more reliable as well and sort of competing on global markets.
I'll just note that this committee on a bipartisan basis advanced quite a few important AI bills in the last Congress that were never put up for a vote on the floor. So I'm hoping that we have a better opportunity for our bipartisan approaches to actually become law in this Congress. Now I yield back.
Representative Issa.
Thank you, Chairman. This will probably go to a couple of you, but Mr. Thayer, I'm going to start with you. It's fair to say that labor, knowledge, investment are the three things that you need to add to our current leadership position if we're going to stay where we are or even increase what was earlier described as now a sub-1-year lead. Is that correct?
That's exactly right, Congressman. And I'll just point back to the excellent work that this House AI task force did on this issue in its chapter on labor and STEM and education.
And Mr. Fisk, I'm going to ask you the other half of the question. When you talked about agents, and all of you were talking about it, when Sputnik went up, it was basically a piece this big that went beep, beep, beep. It was not a step ahead of us, but it was a wake-up call that the step was just behind us. Is that fair to say from a standpoint of history? And if so, then your comments on agents and espionage are the other two elements that I would have to put in addition to labor, knowledge, and investment. Is that fair?
I think that's fair, yes.
Okay, so from a standpoint of this Congress, this committee, and this administration, is it fair to say that we have to have a statement of long-term policy that our allies, including those that we would use BIS and other entities to keep from giving labor, knowledge? We can't stop investment with China, but we can certainly have something to do with the labor and the knowledge and the access to espionage.
Sorry, could you clarify the question?
Well, it's fair to say that we have to have a long-term strategy, and it has to be stated if we're going to achieve that, if you will, pull ahead of what, DeepSeek showed us is a Sputnik.
Yes, I very much agree.
Okay, Mr. Thayer, am I pronouncing that close enough? Okay. If what we need is, in fact, to beat China, and China has 1.2, 1.4 billion people, and 300,000 of them are currently studying in the U.S. In fact, do we need to look at our policy toward educating Chinese in no small portion in the curriculum that they take back to use against us in competition?
Well, I believe if brilliant people want to come here and study and work, that's wonderful for America. We did this with the Soviets. We brought their best and brightest here, gave them opportunity, and encouraged them to stay. I'd like to see that same policy for Chinese students.
You hit the major point that I was getting to.
Yeah.
Encouraged to stay has to be part of that policy, or we are simply helping 300,000 disproportionately
Absolutely.
STEM students take back with them both the overt knowledge and the covert knowledge that comes from being in our universities.
That's right.
From a standpoint of investment, we'll just assume that we're going to continue to have a lead in investment in the U.S. over China. But I want to go back to one more item, and it really goes back to the agent's question. If we do not have a pure AI, do we in fact almost guarantee that one agent could over time invite in as many agents as necessary? In other words, if you're not completely pure, you are in fact infected, and just like any other malignancy, it only takes one to bring in the others. Is that fair to say about being, if you will, foreign agent free?
That's for me.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I wouldn't overstate the complexity of current AI systems. I think today's agents are fairly rudimentary. They can't really succeed at sort of tasks that require long-term planning. But if you sort of plot this out and look at the improvement of these systems over time, yes, you could have agents behaving as a advanced persistent threat living in computer networks and form sort of a much larger cyber risk than those today.
Okay, and lastly, with my remaining time, this committee and the other committee I serve on, Judiciary, and for that matter, a little bit of Energy and Commerce, we've been looking at this whole question of what can be ingested and how do you pay for it. Is it fair to say that I heard unilaterally from all of you, China doesn't give a shit? They simply take it all, including all of our data, and they pay nothing for it. Is that fair to say? And as a result, we need to have a strategy, regardless of being paid, that in fact ensures that all data is available to be ingested by our learning models to compete with China quickly.
So if I may respond to this. Yeah, it's not just China that doesn't give a shit. Our domestic models also ingest all of our data, and these are commercial models, and they don't tell us how they're using this data. So for us to be able to take the moral high ground and say that China shouldn't be doing things in a particular way, we have to start with our own, environment here.
Okay, and I'm closing by just saying, I don't think any kind of a regulation obeyed by us is going to be obeyed by China. So the idea that an agreement here is binding on China, in all fairness, I don't buy that. Mr. Thayer, I'll take that as a
Absolutely.
shaking your head, yes. Thank you, Mr. Extra Time, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Representative Subramaniam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I was looking at sort of the capabilities of DeepSeek and like many others, comparing them to tools that we have here in the U.S. like ChatGPT, and it was quite impressive. I think there's some strengths and some weaknesses, but overall, I was impressed by both the capabilities as well as the cost compared to the capabilities. And we've been talking a lot about an AI Cold War today, and I would just put the question to the panel, and as short as you can. Has China already passed us in this AI Cold War? And if not, how close are they? I'll go. Sorry, Mr. Thayer.
Well, I think obviously the race is tightened. I mean, 2.5 years ago, when we had the Chat GPT moment, that was the reverse Sputnik moment for China, right? That's when they were surprised and taken aback, and we were clearly sort of in the lead at that point. But before that time, we all thought China was in the lead. You read the books from like 2017 to about 2020, it was all about what China was doing. And now we've entered that era again where China is caught up, nimble, low-cost systems. They do this very effectively, especially with their utilization of open weight models.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is a very real legitimate neck-and-neck race. These were two prize fighters going at it. So this is why our policies we have to get it right now.
Mr. Allen.
I don't think it's fair to say that China is in the lead or that DeepSeek suggests that they are. It's more like U.S. model progress occurs a little bit more in a stair step kind of a fashion than it does like an incredible hockey slope. And so they just sort of caught us on the flat part of the stair and caught up to where we were at the beginning of that upward step. And we are now about to take another leap with the NVIDIA Blackwell chips and also with GPT-5 and that sort of next generation of models. And our hope is that the export controls are going to prevent China from taking that next step up the stairs. It's also worth pointing out that DeepSeek's advantages in cost, performance per cost, those are all algorithmic and architectural in nature. There's no unique proprietary training data set. There's no specialized computer hardware that they have that's superior. And so 100% of those advantages, as Tim and I have been talking about for a while, are now available to U.S. companies to basically do the same thing.
Dr. Sayonovich.
I don't think it's to anybody's benefit to be engaging in a Cold War in this, because people figure out a way to do things differently, cheaper and better, right? I have no opinion in particular on export controls, but an anecdote here is that, how does one build rocket ships in Russia versus in the US? In Russia, they make all kinds of lots and lots of cheap parts. They try to put them in, they don't fit, they throw it out, they put in another. Right? In the US, we spend a lot of time on precisely building just the right part and a lot of money, right? So what's the right paradigm? It's somewhere in between. We want to make sure that the academic community, the small-scale entrepreneurs are able to help us build an environment where it's not a stepwise function, where we have a lot of innovation, where we figure out how to do things better in a kind of a free environment, where we don't have to be either affiliated with a government entity or with a private company to be able to contribute to this work.
Thank you.
This is what distinguishes us in the US.
Thank you. Mr. Fiss.
Yeah, so just quickly, I would assess that we were approximately 6 months ahead in model capabilities and maybe 2 years ahead in hardware capabilities based on the most advanced chips that China currently has access to legally under export controls. And this, just to tease out a point that Greg made earlier, this is really important because if you can grow that hardware lead to more like five years, you're now leaning into trends like Moore's law and rapid design and hardware design improvements, such that 5-year lead can be a real exponential lead over time. So I think this highlights the importance of export controls.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I agree with a lot of what was said. My concern is that some of our policies, especially in the past couple of months, are getting us to a point where not only is China catching up to us, but we're standing still or even moving backwards. We're talking about firing very capable AI experts in our federal agencies and cutting funding for research. Much of the research was actually the basis for a lot of our innovations in AI as a country. And then we've talked a lot about export controls, but not a lot about how tariffs are actually going to make everything more expensive, including the infrastructure we need to improve our AI. And then, national security policies, privacy policies. We talked about a talent war. I'm concerned right now that a lot of the policies that are being put in place are going to hurt our ability to stay ahead. And I think we are neck and neck right now. So I appreciate you all being here today, but I hope that we shift and this administration shifts its priorities. Thank you.
A gentleman yields back. We'll hear next from the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Rouser. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. AI is just an absolutely fascinating subject to me. It's kind of like space. I think about space and I think about what's beyond space, what's beyond that. I mean, it's never ending. And AI has so much potential in so many ways. I just Googled a question, in fact, and with the help of AI, I get this answer. Approximately 54% of American adults read at or below a 6th grade level, meaning that nearly half of the adult population struggles with basic reading skills. Is there a role for AI here in the education process? And not only that, but we need talent in order to advance in this space. Have y'all given any thought to that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, may I? Okay. So I do really think that we need to step up our literacy efforts when it comes to basic reading and writing skills, but also when it comes to AI literacy. And this is a point where federal investment is crucial. We don't have large-scale efforts right now that would help people understand what AI is, what it does, what happens to their data, etc. So this is a huge opportunity we're missing that is going to impact us today and in generations to come.
Well, I think there's a huge opportunity in healthcare too. You get one cure, you save trillions of dollars, certainly hundreds of billions of dollars, which obviously, has positive impact as it relates to our deficits and our debt.
Absolutely. Congressman, I have a multi-part series for the R Street Institute called AI and Public Health Series, and it talks about all of the different types of amazing innovations that are coming about due to AI and machine learning, and then specifically cites the cost savings for our very expensive public health system, our health system more generally. And so I think that's what you're going to there is like we can find better efficiencies, but also better cures, help people live longer, healthier lives.
Yeah. Any other comment on that?
If I may, I just want to say that in both the health and in the education sphere, we should not assume that these benefits will occur if we just do nothing. I would sort of give an analogy here to smartphones in school, right? There is a way to use tablets or smartphones that is education enhancing. But if you just sort of let things go the way they will, kids will probably just watch TikTok all day and they will not be smarter at the end of the day. And I would say the same is probably true of AI. There are ways to use AI that will dramatically enhance the quality of education, but that's not an inherent feature of just throwing AI in there and assuming everything's going to go great. And in the same domain on healthcare, here I would say that the productivity improvements are so exciting, right? In terms of coming up with candidate molecules for drugs, in terms of identifying, possible disease pathways, that we sort of have to look at the rest of our health R&D regulatory ecosystem and basically say, what are going to be the bottlenecks? If we have a 10,000x improvement in productivity over here, but we still have the exact same bottlenecks we've always had over here, then that 10,000x productivity in candidate molecules is not going to lead to any faster pace of drug generation. So basically I'm saying is we should not assume that if we just let everything go, it's going to turn out fine. This actually requires action. And it's the same in the case of Sputnik, right? If we hadn't responded, the Soviets would have won the space race. It's not like it was our birthright to win. We had to work to win.
Yeah, and I think what you're getting to, you got to have the right regulatory framework. Going back to preemption, what are the key steps to making sure we have the right regulatory framework so that you have innovation, it's not stifled, but at the same time you have guardrails in place?
In 1997, I mentioned that the Clinton administration put forward the framework for global electronic commerce that many Republicans in Congress agreed with, which was a market-based, idea-driven, kind of opportunity-driven environment and ecosystem for the digital economy and the internet. And that worked wonders. You just look at the natural real-world experiment we've had over the last quarter century on either side of the Atlantic between us and Europe, and you ask yourself a simple question: name Europe's leading digital technology innovators today. Silence. We just can't. There's only a few. And the reality is the household names in Europe are American companies. Why? Because we got the policy prerequisites of growth and opportunity right for the internet. We can do it again for AI.
If I may, I would just say my approach to the governance framework would be twofold. Number one is real regulation on the most worst case scenario type risks, right? We do not want AI making bioweapons not just within the reach of an evil genius, but within the reach of an evil moron. There, I want hard regulation. For everything else, I want probably more soft regulation. Basically, the government, like the AI Safety Institute, disseminating best practices, not draconian enforcing them, but making these resources available so that companies know what good governance looks like and have a lower cost to entry when it comes to implementing those types of maneuvers.
Very good. Thank you. My time's expired.
Gentleman yields back. We'll hear next from my colleague from California, Ms. Rivas. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Obernolte. Dr. Stoyanovich, one of the things that I've mentioned previously in this committee is the need for investment in our scientific and academic research ecosystem to fund the workforce and research for the future. The needed investments in our STEM education and workforce of the future is in opposition to what this administration has done, despite them touting the need for advancing the American AI industry. Instead of uplifting this work in the national interest, this administration has cut federal funding for research and fired science staff, implemented tariffs in a chaotic way that has sent the stock market into free fall, making it harder not just for families to buy goods, but for AI and tech companies to buy the materials to build and create the physical data centers needed to power this technology, and remove the previous administration's executive order on prioritizing AI safety, responsibility, and fairness. Dr. Stoyanovich, in our competition with China, can you discuss how these policies and actions taken around AI safety and responsibility will actually set us back instead of advancing the American AI industry?
Thank you for this question. And I'm glad that we get to think about how to advance our national competitiveness, not only with a kind of an isolationist lens, where we're trying to protect the assets that already exist, but with the lens of participating and helping build an environment of international cooperation where we can all benefit from the kinds of advances in academic research, in entrepreneurship, in data assets, and also in figuring out what the right balance should be between transparency and privacy protection and security. And of course, the United States is distinctive
you.